Designed in 1937 to replace the Hawker Hurricane of the 1930s, the Hawker Typhoon, nicknamed Tiffy, was originally conceived as a specialized interceptor. This system was developed in response to a need from the British Air Ministry specification F-18/37 for a plane capable of handling the latest 2,000 horsepower engines from Rolls-Royce and Napier. The Typhoon was supposed to be able to achieve this because of the promising Napier 24-cylinder liquid-cooled 2,000-plus horsepower Sabre engine installed in the airframe. The Typhoon, at least on paper, might have been a formidable opponent to the renowned Supermarine Spitfire and its Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, but events would show something different and send the Typhoon down a different road. While the concept of a brand new aircraft was exciting, development revealed a number of serious flaws in the design, most notably in the aircraft's fuselage and the new Sabre engine. The first flight took place in February of 1940, and on May 9, 1940, a prototype Typhoon had a catastrophic breakdown of the fuselage at the base of empennage immediately after the cockpit. At the same time, the Sabre engine experienced a number of problems. Because of the increasing complexity of the situation, the continuation of the Typhoon program was in peril. The Air Ministry considered abandoning the project entirely in favor of acquiring Republic P-47 Thunderbolts, which were manufactured in the United States of America. When the German Focke-Wulf 190 Virgus series of aircraft finally arrived in September of 1941, it gave the Typhoon project a shot at competing with the elusive high-performing German aircraft. Visually, the Typhoon offered a menacing pose. This aircraft's most prominent defining physical characteristic was a massive radiator installation positioned just below the chin of the fuselage. The scoop sat directly below and behind the propeller spinner and integrated into the lower portion of the fuselage. The cockpit for the pilot was positioned about in the center of the design, above and aft of the trailing edge of the wings. The fuselage itself was almost tubular and ended in a traditional empennage with a rounded vertical fin. The wings had a low monoplane cantilever design and were rounded in shape. The undercarriage was conventional, with both the main landing gears and the tailwheel fully retractable. The structure was largely made of metal stressed skin. The original Typhoon design called for no less than 12 7.7mm or .303 caliber machine guns. Despite their menacing names, bigger caliber armaments like 12.7mm or 50 caliber heavy machine guns and cannons became standard aboard airplanes as the war progressed. This is why the Typhoon's primary weaponry was upgraded to a 4x20mm gun array, making it far more potent than before. A pair on each wing, distinguished by the gun barrel fairings that protrude from the front wing edges. If necessary, the final production model of the Typhoon could further expand its arsenal by installing high-explosive rockets or conventional drop bombs. There was a very steep ascent to the cockpit of the Hawker Typhoon. While later versions of the aircraft had the more standard sliding bubble canopy, earlier models had an automobile-style hinged door, similar to the Bell-era Cobra. Early cockpit designs were likewise notorious for having a limited vision. While the car-style doors gave a more comfortable way for the pilot to enter the Typhoon, they also created an unconventional means of escape in the event of an emergency. The cockpit of the Hawker Typhoon, like the cockpits of several other types of World War II aircraft, was prone to maintaining high and dangerous levels of carbon monoxide for the pilot. So, the pilot of the Hawker Typhoon was practically required to wear his oxygen mask from the minute he started his engine before takeoff until the minute he had safely landed and turned off his engine. This was the case even when the aircraft was equipped with a pressurized cockpit. Former pilots also reported high cockpit noise. British aircraft typically use the flying blind standard for their instrumentation, which was why they regarded as the most practical layout. A standardized cockpit made for a friendlier transition for pilots from trainer to operational aircraft, as layouts were relatively identical in most British aircraft to the point that the operator could, in fact, fly any RAF aircraft without help from the instruments. When the Typhoon was finally put into service in August of 1941, it was hailed with mixed reviews. Even though it was the RAF's first 400-mile-per-hour fighter, the Napier engine proved rather complicated, needing constant maintenance and yet prone to breakdowns in the field. The urgency to make it happen meant that the power plant was introduced before it was technically ready to be used on any platform. The cost of achieving maximum speed was more than compensated for by the aircraft's typically subpar rate of climb. Besides that, although being planned as an high-altitude performance interceptor, the Typhoon performed relatively poorly above medium altitude and surprisingly proved its worth in low to mid-altitude missions instead. Compared to the Supermarine Spitfire, the Typhoon proved to be a more effective fighter aircraft in mid-altitude missions. The upshot was that the Typhoons were increasingly consigned to this task and outfitted with more conventional ground attack capabilities than was originally envisioned. The Typhoon could engage ground targets and still offer up competing performance when tangling with German bombers and fighters at this level. As an added bonus, the Typhoon introduction ended the FW-190's low-level strikes over the southern British shoreline, as the fighter-bomber proved excellent at attacking these small German aircraft at their ideal operating height. The structural flaw in the design of the tail was another factor that contributed to delays and, sadly, some deaths, but this issue was eventually resolved, albeit temporarily, with the installation of 20 fish plates made of an alloy that were welded together at the base of the empennage. By 1943, the Typhoon was armed with air-to-ground rockets and two 250-pound bombs packed under its wings. This, coupled with its low-altitude performance, made for an exceptional fighter-bomber hybrid. In the days leading up to the D-Day landings, Typhoons significantly prevented both daytime and nighttime German communications. As the Allies established a stronger presence in France, Typhoon used crew to help build new front lines for the advancing ground troops. Typhoons started operating from airfields in France and, more importantly, Holland, which allowed them to attack targets on German territory. With the help of escort fighter support from Spitfires and Mustangs, Typhoons stayed with the ground battle until the end of the war. Their annihilation of German support units proved essential in the strategic thrust that was eventually responsible for the Allies' success. Whether it was ammo depots, vehicles, railway yards, or the German ground troops themselves, no German target was safe from the Typhoon's cannons, bombs, and rockets. By the end of the war, some 3,300 Typhoons were produced. Despite these numbers, with the advent of the jet age in the post-war world, once 1946 rolled around, Typhoons were retired from active duty. At its peak, the Typhoon was used by 26 separate squadrons, which is particularly remarkable, given that the design was almost scrapped during development. Aircraft such as Typhoons are wonders in wartime. Their initial designs are often rigged for failure from the outset, only to have the ever-changing face of warfare force a new role player to be added to the ranks. Such was the case with the Hawker Typhoon that, in all respects, it was actually a successful aircraft, despite the design drawbacks and limitations. The RAF recognized the value of the platform and used it. By the time the Germans took note, it was all but too late for the Reich.